Hi everybody, Bryan Norcross here with a Sunday afternoon tropical update on Tropical Storm Elsa. Let's get right to it in the 5 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. And what we see is we have here a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Now, this situation has been pretty confusing here today because look at the pressure over here. 1,009 millibars is a very high pressure for a 60-mile-an-hour storm, but we also have strong high pressure out in the Atlantic, so the combination is no doubt having something to do with the winds. And moving to the northwest only at 14. If you remember, it was going 31 miles per hour, which is fast as we've ever seen a tropical system go, was in the Caribbean. It has slowed down as forecast. Now, when we look over here at the system itself, we can kind of make out a comma shape back in here. And this is where the strongest winds are and the worst weather. So we're going to remember that kind of comma shape as it gets near Florida late in the day tomorrow. We also see up here, this is the radar out of Key West, just seeing one of the outer bands. So that's not an especially strong band there, but it is now coming into U.S. radar range. The Cuban radars, of course, are monitoring it very well. And I want to show you one kind of interesting thing in the track here. Look close up here. Back, this was last night. Notice it kind of jogged back. It went forward up to here, then suddenly back, and then moving forward again. Notice more or less on the same track, but this was the system realigning. The surface circulation had gotten so far out of the head of the upper level circulation that it became disconnected essentially, and then the storm reformed under the upper level circulation and kind of continued on its path. The net effect of that is that it's delayed the arrival of everything into the Keys, into Florida, by several hours, but it really hasn't affected the forecast or changed anything very much as best we can tell. Okay, let's go forward now and take a look at the cone here, which of course is what everybody's interested in, and this will give us the timing of things as well. And what you see is that it's right here now by this cape in Florida called Cabo Cruz, there, that little point in the southeastern part of the country. And it's got a little bit of warm water to go over here, assuming that the center stays in the cone. And then, as it's moving fairly slowly in this 13, 14 mile per hour range, it's going to be over a pretty good chunk of Cuba, and there is a little bit of high country there, high terrain in the middle of the country, not anywhere near as much as over here. And I should mention that, remember that band I talked about on the back side of it? Well, that's running right into the highest mountains in Cuba back over here, and so that will be disruptive. We think this will be disruptive here when the center goes over this middle part of the country. So the point is that we think the system, when it emerges out here into the Florida Straits, is going to be somewhat disruptive. So moving forward, the idea is that it's in the general vicinity. The center is west of the lower Florida Keys in the middle of the night tomorrow night. Now, National Hurricane Center is carrying it as a 60-mile-an-hour storm at that time. I wouldn't at all be surprised if the top winds were somewhat weaker, but I want to stress, remember that the bad weather is on the right side. So even if the center is out here in the cone, I don't want anybody looking at the cone and saying, okay, looks like its odds are the center is going to be west of the Keys, so we're not going to get the weather. Remember, the bad weather is on this side of the storm. So we do expect the band of kind of bad weather, whatever that bad weather is at that point, to be over the Keys, especially over the lower and middle Keys, somewhere there, and possibly fringing into the upper Keys as well. We'll talk about the odds of that in just a second. But then it moves north, so you see that Tuesday afternoon it's moving past the Keys, and the worst of this storm may very well be on the west coast of Florida. Now, it really depends on what happens. The National Hurricane Center is continuing to forecast a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm here. If we had to put odds on this, we'd say that down when it emerges from Cuba, it might be weaker, but then there comes the opportunity over the warm waters of the Gulf, even though the upper level winds don't seem totally supportive of intensification. That's not that's a possibility. So when it turns into the west coast of Florida, turning in like this, it's going to be driving water on that right side into the coast there. So possibly we are expecting some storm surge, and they have a storm surge watch up. They may get a storm surge warning for the water to be 3 feet above high tide there on the west coast at least. So that may be the biggest threat in low-lying areas from Naples on up to north of Tampa Bay. So we'll just keep that in mind for the possibility coming up. All right, now in terms of the winds, if you look at this diagram here, what it shows you is, see where the bright yellows are? The bright yellows here where we have more likely, and notice that goes up the west coast, more likely winds of over 40 miles per hour, and a slight chance on the southeast coast, Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach County, Broward, Palm Beach County, and so forth. Just a slight chance of winds over 40 miles an hour being technical, less than a 20% chance of winds being over 40 miles per hour on the southeast coast, but maybe some gusts, and then a little more likely in the Keys, especially in gusts, and especially in the lower and middle Keys where the tropical storm warning is now in effect. All right, so there are the models, and the slight shift away from the Keys today. That doesn't take all the weather off the Keys, but it does pull everything away a little bit. It also may indicate that the storm swings a little bit more into the Gulf and is over the warm water a little longer. So again, that may cause it to be a little stronger on the west coast, depending on the upper level winds, remains to be seen. So in terms of the impacts in the lower and middle Keys, tropical storm force winds of 40 miles per hour or higher at times when the band comes in, and gusts to over 40 miles per hour in the upper Keys. So just not as frequent in the upper Keys and more in gusts. 2 to 4 inches of rain, up to 6 inches of rain possible in the Keys when these bands come over, because once the band is coming over, it's likely to come over the same kind of area, same kind of part of the Keys. Impossible to say exactly where, but the same part is likely to get more and more. In Dade and Broward County, well, we're expecting just some bands of heavy rain and some gusty winds in those bands, not continuous wind. We think that will be to the west. 2 to 3 inches of rain possible is forecast by the National Weather Service here in Miami. So that's the way it stands right now. Of course, we'll continue with updates. It looks like the bad weather moves into the Keys late-ish in the day tomorrow, and it's overnight tomorrow night into Tuesday, and then moving on by, and it becomes a problem for the west coast of the state. And it looks like, again, tomorrow night into early Tuesday for Miami, Dade, and Broward as well, whatever is going to happen, which is really just going to be some gusty winds and squalls, it looks like right now. All right, that's it for now. Stay with us here, and of course, keep up to date here and on Local 10.